Today we're going to be factoring perfect square trinomials. Perfect square trinomials are the products that we get when we do these two special products, either the square of a sum or the square of a difference. Perfect squares are always going to follow these two patterns because these are our special products. It'll either be a squared plus 2ab plus b squared or a squared minus 2ab. And remember, the sign of this middle term is based on the sign that you have in your problem, and that's going to be really important when we factor, because whatever we have down here is what we're going to put in our factored form. Now, in order to factor a perfect square trinomial, you have to have three things happen. First of all, this first term has to be a perfect square. You have to be able to take a square root of it. The last term also has to be a perfect square. Now, when you take the square root of this first term, that's going to be what we consider a, like we had up here in our problem. Oops, a. And this last term is going to be our b, which is what we have in the second part of our problem. Now, our middle term is the trickiest one to decide. That has to be the product of the two square roots, and then we have to double it. Remember, that's our 2 times a times b. So let me show you how this works on a real problem. Okay? The first thing you want to do is look at your first term and decide, is this a perfect square? Well, I know that the square root of 4x squared is 2x. Now that is going to be what I consider a. Now the last term also has to be a perfect square, and I know that the square root of 9 is 3. This is going to be what I consider b. Okay? Now the hard part is this middle term. Remember, this middle term has to be 2ab. So to test it out, I'm going to do 2, and then I'm going to take my term for a, which was this 2x, and then I'm going to take my term for b, which was this 3, and I'm going to multiply all three of these things together. 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, and I get 12x. Now, if this is a perfect square trinomial, then this number is going to match this number, which it does, which means this is a perfect square trinomial. So when I go to factor it, I know that since this has a plus sign up here, that this is going to be the square of a sum. And it's going to work out just like this. So to write my factored form, I have to take my term for a, which is right here, this 2x, and I have to take my term for b, which is right here, this 3, and because it's the square of a sum, right here, I have to put a plus sign in the middle, and then I square it. And that's how I use my special products to help me factor. Let's try another one. Again, step 1. Is this first term a perfect square? It is. That's my 5x, because 5x times 5x gives me 25x squared. That's what I'm going to consider a. My last term, 9, is a perfect square. 3 times 3 is 9. That's going to be my b. My middle term has to be 2 times a times b. So that's going to be 2 times a, which is 5x, times b, which is 3. Well, 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30. And I have 30x. So again, let's look and see, does this number match this number? And it does. Now, we're not going to worry that this sign is a negative and this is a positive, because remember, this sign is the result that we get when we do our special product. And to get this minus 2ab in the middle, we know that this had to be the square of a difference. So we just put a minus in the middle. So when I go to factor this, my a term is 5x, my b term is 3, and I know because I have the subtraction sign here, this is going to be the square of a difference, and I just have to square it. Now we can use this kind of factoring to help us solve equations also. Just like before, my first step is going to be to make this equation equal 0. So I have to add 81 to both sides here, and I'm going to get 4x squared plus 36x plus 81 equals 0. Now my second step was to factor this, and in order to factor it, I'm going to see, is this a perfect square? Yep. Is this a perfect square? Yep. And is this going to be 2ab? So is it 2 times a times b? Well, let's see. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 9 is 36. So this is 36x. Oops, 36. Let me fix that. 36x. So this is a perfect square. So when it comes to factoring it, I'm going to use my a term, I'm going to use my b term, and then I'm going to look back at my original problem. It's a plus, which means this is the square of a sum. So I'm going to put that there and make it equal 0. Now, we know that this 2x plus 9 squared is the same as saying 2x plus 9 times 2x plus 9. And we know that our last step is always to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve it. So I'm going to set this factor equal 0, and I could set this factor equal to 0, but they're both exactly the same factor. So I really, since this is a square of a sum, and I have the same factor 2 times, I'm not going to solve the problem twice. Okay? To solve this, I'm just going to subtract 9 on both sides, and I get 2x equals negative 9. Then, let me move this up here so I have some more room. I'm going to do 2x equals negative 9, divide both sides here by 2, and I find out my final answer is x is negative 9 over 2.